Thank you guys for having me back at Kurius. I always love doing chats with you guys because you live up to your name. You're very curious and ask good questions. So I'm excited to be back. Tonight, we're going to be talking about APIs and Postman. And I'm not going to assume that you know anything about either one of those things. Quick disclaimer though, I do not work for Postman. So if you were hoping to like smooth or get a job from me or something, I'm not the person to ask, but I am a big fan of Postman and use it in my daily work. I am a full stack developer at a company called Mintbean, and we host weekly hackathons. And we actually have a platform for like submitting projects. And so we've built an API. We'll get into what that is, but we've built an API so that our website can talk to our database. So, without further ado, what are we here for tonight? So first we're going to talk about what APIs are and network requests. And then we're going to dive into Postman, which is a tool that we can use to explore APIs, including how you can get Postman, how you can use it to make network requests and view the responses, and also how you can make collections and navigate workspaces. So by the end of this hour, you can go from knowing nothing about APIs to being able to even build them, is the hope. And I'm very open to like people yelling out questions in the middle at any time. Feel free to do that. I'll try to keep my eye on the workshop channel as well and see if there's any questions. So yeah, I hope to make it interactive. So first things first, what is an API? We keep saying this word. And what are network requests? So API stands for Application Programming Interface, which sounds very long, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. We actually interface with things every day in the world around us. So for example, I'm holding in my hand right now a TV remote, and it has a bunch of buttons on it. And I know if I press like the down on the volume, my volume's going to go down. I know if I press a couple numbers, it's going to switch to that channel. So this TV remote is presenting me with an interface for me to talk to the television. And so I don't have to know anything about, electrical engineering or even how the signal is getting from the TV remote to the TV, whether that's, Bluetooth or infrared, I don't know. And I don't care because it's the TV remote is an interface that simplifies all the operations I can do just with a couple buttons. So the example with the TV remote is like a human hardware interface, I would say, because it's something in between the human and the hardware to help communicate operations. But we're going to be talking about application programming interfaces, which only means that what's talking to each other isn't a human and a hardware, but it's an application and an application. So let's say, for example, you are building an app, and you want to get the weather. Like one thing you could do is, set up your own weather stations and get all of that data and import it directly into your app. Or you can use an API to talk to another app that specializes in getting weather data. So you don't have to deal with that or think about how one even, takes the temperature around the world. All you do is talk to that app via an API. So the analogy I like to use here is an API you can think of kind of like a waiter at a restaurant. You'll be asking the waiter to go get you things. You'll be asking the waiter to change your order, and the waiter's going to be, passing data back into the kitchen, asking for the chef to make certain recipes, or, getting the soup of the day to report back to you. So the restaurant analogy is kind of a fun way to visualize APIs. And when we're talking about APIs that make data requests across a network. Oftentimes we'll be using the HTTP protocol. And for those of you that aren't familiar, it's just a a convention, an agreed upon convention for talking about data that's transferred across the internet. It's one of many protocols, but it's quite common, and you guys are actually using it every day. There's a lot of what's called HTTP verbs out there that perform different operations. So the four really big ones are a GET request, a POST request, a PUT or a patch request, and delete request. This is not an exhaustive list of verbs, but these are the very common ones. And basically, a GET request is for retrieving data. You aren't going to alter anything in somebody else's database. You're just kind of reading that data. A POST request is when you want to submit new data. A common example of this is when you put your first name, last name, and email into a form to sign up for a newsletter. You're submitting your data newly to somebody's database somewhere. A PUT, or sometimes also called a patch request, is when you want to update existing data. So say you have an account someplace and you want to change your username, you would make a patch request to do that. And delete obviously deletes data. But it isn't the request verb itself that does these things. Somebody out there has coded an API that takes your orders with the verbs and then interprets them to perform operations on their side. So if we were going to use the restaurant analogy here, I would say a GET request would be asking for the wine list for this restaurant, because you aren't, you're just trying to read some data, right? You just want to know what wine is available. A POST request would be placing your order. Say you're going to order a pizza. It's a POST request. A PUT request would be changing your order. So say you said, yeah, I'm not really feeling the pepperoni toppings. I think I'm going to switch to anchovy. You can make a PUT request. And then delete would be actually, I forgot my wallet. I'm going to delete my order and go home. So I hope that the restaurant analogy helps you understand these verbs a little bit. Also, I'll be sharing these slides, so you have links to all the resources. Do you have a question from right down left? Maybe the mic just clicked on there a sec. Okay. So you guys are actually making these types of requests every day, maybe without knowing it, maybe with knowing it. For example, when you're using your browser and you enter a URL into the URL bar, your browser is actually making a GET request to that domain to get the HTML that's displayed in your web browser. So for example, you can go to the Kurius website and, well, first I'm going to open up this inspector tab. So in Chrome and Firefox and most browsers, you can press Control-Shift-I to open the inspector, or Command-Shift-I if you're on Mac. And you get all this fancy stuff to kind of see behind the scenes in the browser. We can actually go to the network tab and see what's happening in the network when we hit Kurius.com, or Kurius.ca, sorry. So if we travel there, it makes a ton of requests. These are actually all different network requests for different assets. But what I really want to show you is the first one here, www.kurius.ca. And you'll see that it was a successful request. It was a GET request. And the response was all this. And this is the HTML that forms the scaffolding that builds out the web page. So you guys are making GET requests every time that you're visiting a website. Surely you're making POST requests as well when you're filling out forms. And sometimes delete requests depending on what you're doing in the browser. So far, are we all on the same page? Are you guys following? Feel free to throw any questions in the workshop channel or just blurt them out at any time. And can you guys all still hear me, by the way?
Yep.
Oh, good. So I'm not talking to myself. Okie doke. So knowing that, we can now dive into Postman, Because as you can see, you can obviously inspect request and response in the network tab of your browser, which is nice, but Postman gives you many more superpowers for dynamically like saving your requests and grouping them together and sharing them using variables and testing. We'll get into all of that. So what is it a tool for? It helps you explore like network requests and their responses. And you'll see this is what the application interface looks like. You can download the Postman desktop app for Linux and Mac and Windows for free from the Postman website. Just go to postman.com/downloads. And this tool is free to use personally. You can optionally upgrade to use some like team sharing features. But even the team sharing features are free up to 25 requests. So I really do encourage you to check out Postman if you don't have it, because it's actually the way that I got familiar with and learned the ins and outs of, HTTP requests and responses, and it's really helped me wrap my mind around something that's usually a black box. Because application interfaces are, code talking to code. You don't always have a graphical user interface in between, and that's what Postman serves as. So you can see here, there's a lot of windows and tabs, and we're going to go into what all of that is. So first, let's check out how one would go about doing request and response in Postman. So this here is Postman. And when you first log in, you'll be greeted with this welcome workspace, and it's a very tab-oriented interface. So even the welcome is a tab. So if you want to make a new request, all you do is press this little plus tab here, and you'll get a new request panel. And you'll see that there's this little drop-down for choosing your HTTP verb. So you can do get, post, put, patch, delete. We talked about those, but a whole slew of other ones are here as well. To be honest, I've never used any but these 5 at the top, but I'm sure there's a use case for these too. They give you little nudges, like here's where you're going to put request URL.
We can't actually see whatever you're doing because you're not streaming. You're only streaming your PowerPoint right now.
I see. Let me see if I can. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to try choosing the right screen. Do you know in Discord? Oh, I was in application. You can do screens. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yeah, now I can see it.
Both your
Do you guys see 2 screens? Let me pick one screen. Hold on. Screen 2. Seems to want to show you both my screens. Is it too small, you guys? Can you see this at all?
Can't really read it.
Can't really read it. Hold on a second. Let me see what's up with my screen. Change Windows to... Well, I can go right into Postman. Can you guys see this?
Yeah, we can. I mean, that's an option. You can switch between PowerPoint and this in the application directly.
Okay. I'll just do full window applications. All right, so to be... I'll reintroduce Postman real quickly. You can see right here, there's a drop-down for all of the HTTP verbs. And right here is where you're going to put the endpoint. So, for example, before we had gone to Kurius.ca in the web browser, but now we can just put that URL right here and make a GET request as if we were in the browser. And we should get back the HTML that we saw in the network tab, and we do. So just like the browser, you can see a lot of details about the response, not just the data that came back. Obviously, we have some HTML, but you can also see from this dropdown, there's headers you can look at. You can see if any cookies came along. It looks like one did. You can see that it was a status 200 request, which means a success. So there's a bunch of number codes in HTTP that represent different types of response. And 200 is a good response. 400 is like a bad request, anything in the 400 range. And 500 is something that went wrong on the server side. So that's a very simple call and request, just making a GET request. We have no extra parameters that we need. So this is an example of fetching HTML. Oftentimes, you're going to be using APIs to fetch data. For example, we were talking about the weather API before. You might put in a weather API endpoint and a city name, and it's going to send you back the weather right now in that place. I found a very basic free API that gives you random Kanye West quotes. And I can share the link in the workshop room if any of you are interested in playing with that. I'll put it there. And it's a play on words, Kanye REST, because REST is one of the types of APIs you can build. So basically, the Kanye West API has this endpoint. Actually, that's the GitHub repo. Wrong endpoint. There's a repo online that will show you what endpoint you have to use, and I'm doing it off screen, but I'm going to paste it right here. So it's https API Kanye.rest. And when you send a GET request here, it's going to return a JSON object with a quote. This is a very short quote. We can get another one. So my greatest award is what I'm about to do. So every time you hit this endpoint with a GET request, it's going to send you back a quote. And there's a lot of ways we can visualize this. Right now it's in pretty mode, which gives a nice indentation and color formatting based on the fact that it's JSON it knows. But you can also, see it as a raw response with no spaces. Sometimes, if it's HTML, you can see a preview. I don't think you can see, there's not much to see in a preview of JSON. Sometimes if you do a little extra coding in the test tab here, you can even return the data as like a chart and other forms of visualization. But we aren't going to do anything that fancy today. Just showing you how you can make a GET request to not only get HTML, but also JSON data. So that's one use case. It's a pretty simple API. You can't give it any options. Another fun API that's also free is the SpaceX API. And I think I can change my screen back to the browser. I have to be in the workshop room, I guess. And so, can you guys see can you see GitHub on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're working with APIs that other people have developed, it's super duper important that you read the documentation. And here there's a GitHub repo dedicated to the SpaceX API that, well, it shows you all the code, but also gives you documentation on how to use the API. And it's important because sometimes there'll be authentication, like you have to log in or share an API key so that they know who you are when you're making the request. In the case of the SpaceX API, you can make GET requests without having any authentication, and that's what we're going to do. So here they have shown us that the base URL for using this API is this. And now I have to switch back to Postman, huh? Switching to Postman. All right. So we're going to make a GET request to this endpoint from the documentation. We'll have to switch back to the documentation real quick and see what we can do. So with the SpaceX API, there's a ton of different data that we can get back. We can get launches, fairings, rockets, ships, Starlink, and history. Tons of stuff. Maybe something interesting to look at would be rockets. So it says here you'd make a GET request to the endpoint, and then you add rockets to the end. And this is going to return as a list of rockets from SpaceX. So I'll switch back to Postman. And I added rockets to the end of the endpoint, and we'll hit send. And you'll see in the bottom, we get back a response. It's an array, so a list of different objects. And it looks like each object is quite large, but it contains the rocket's height, mass, diameter, tons of details about the rockets. So you can imagine how this type of thing would be useful. Say like you want to build a SpaceX dashboard where you can learn about all the rockets from SpaceX. All you have to do is code your dashboard to make a call, an API call to this endpoint. And you'll know, thanks to Postman, that the data that comes back is going to be shaped like this. That means you can map the data to however you want to display it in your dashboard. And this gives you so much power because you don't have to actually go and make a spreadsheet of all of the different details of all the rockets at SpaceX. If they add a new rocket, you don't have to think about it because they'll supply all of that data to you. So far, do we have any questions? Is it all making sense so far? Okay. Was that a question from somebody or just a thumbs up? I'll take it as a thumbs up. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a thumbs up.
okay, awesome. Thanks for checking in. So we've done some pretty simple requests so far. The endpoints, we're just pasting them in as directed in the documentation. But there's more things you can do even with a GET request. Sometimes you can pass what's called query parameters, which is like additional parameters at the same endpoint to, specify particulars about the data that you want to get back. To demonstrate this, we're going to use an API that gives you random images. So let me switch you back into the browser. I'm getting better at switching screens, I promise. So we're going to go to an API called Pixem, pixem.photos. And I like this website because it has very simple documentation. It tells you if you hit this, you're going to get a random image. And we can prove them right by trying it out. So we'll make a GET request using Postman to this endpoint. I'll open a new tab to make a new request. Paste in the endpoint with the GET request and hit send. And it's sending back an image. And the documentation says that the first one is the width up here in the parameter, or excuse me, in the endpoint URL. And the second is the height. So we can actually change this, like say we want to get a square image that's 500 by 500 pixels. We just update our request and send it again. And you'll see it sent a new image that's square. And we can do this all day. But the thing I wanted to show you that's different about this endpoint is it takes query parameters. So you'll see there's a bunch of tabs up in request world. The upper half of Postman is request world. The bottom is response world. But in request world, we have all of these extra things we can edit our request with. And for the GET request, we can add query parameters. And it says in documentation, if we take a look, that you can add query parameters like question mark grayscale, and it will send back images that are black and white, or like blur, question mark blur, and it will blur the image a little. This could be useful if you're using it as like a banner on your website. And the blur parameter takes an argument that's a number. So I think like on a scale of 0 to 10, you can have a little blurry to a lot blurry. So let's go ahead and try those parameters. So first, we'll try the grayscale one. So to add query parameters, you can directly type them here, like this. And if I spelled it right, everything will come back black and white. It did. Or Postman gives you this great little interface down here to, keep your keys and your values separated and very clean. So you don't need a question mark here. You just put the key here, and Postman will go ahead and drop the question mark in the URL for you. And this is nice because sometimes you have a very long request URL with a ton of query parameters, and there's a lot of question marks and a lot of ampersands, and hard to organize yourself. But with Postman, you can have multiple keys. For example, we can even add the blur one that's in the documentation as a second key. And they said you can use different values. We'll go ahead and try 2. So you see I've added a second query parameter, and Postman very kindly puts the ampersand here, which is kind of like almost like a comma in your query parameters, saying we want the grayscale and the blur options on this request. So I can go ahead and send this off, and I should expect a black and white image that's a little blurry. And just to see if this is actually changing anything, we can set the blur to 10, and you'll see we get an undiscernible image, very blurry. So Postman helps you organize your query parameters with this params tab. Okay, so far we've only been making GET requests, and you know that we also have all these other verbs. I would like to show you guys what a post request might look like. And at the same time, I'll show you how I've used Postman to help develop an API. So right now, I am going to take you back to my browser. And I've been developing a game for interpreters to practice interpreting numbers, which is not as easy as it sounds. And so the premise of the game is you'll pick a language, like French, and you click Try Me. You click Start, and it's going to start a countdown. And
247,
I don't know if you can hear the app talking, but
260,
it's saying these numbers out loud,
231,
and I'm typing them in.
227,
So the point of the game is this will be speech recognition instead of me typing, so you don't actually see the numbers, and you just have to say them as they're spoken to you. But
176,
the more you get in a row,
327,
the higher
185,
your streak and your score gets. And if you miss 3 or more, it's game over. So you can see
164,
this is an app that has a front end because we have a graphical interface. But at the end of the game, when I die,
470,
I have to get some wrong answers here.
199,
Okay, so I game over and I have a score of 280. So when you get your score, I'm actually talking to an API backend that's saving the scores, because at the home screen, there's a leaderboard that you can see everybody's scores. So right now I'm logged in as a user called Randy. If I had gotten a score that was high enough, it would appear here on the leaderboard. And all of that talking to the database happens through my backend API that I coded. So I'll take you into VS Code and you can see what's going on there. And VS Code. Okay. So this is an app. The backend is coded in Express, which is like Node.js JavaScript. And you can see, this is the important part. These are all the routes that you can hit in my app. So you can make a post request to log in or log out, to log in or log out. But importantly, you can make a GET request to get all of the scores, which is what the leaderboard does. Or at the end of the game, the app makes a post request to add new score to the database. So this just means like when you hit this endpoint, you perform this action. So when you hit the posting the scores, you add a score. And we can take a quick look at what that means. So in the add score function, all it's doing is taking from the request body, the user ID, the score, how high their streak is, and which language they used. And then it just takes all of that data and saves it into Mongo database. And if something goes wrong, it's going to send back a 500 error. But if everything goes okay, it will be a 200, and it gives back the new score object that we've just created. So when I was developing this, as I showed you in the game, it's a very synchronous game. It takes time to build up a large score and submit it. And if I were to like be manually building the whole app, I would have to spend 10 minutes just to add a new score sometimes if the scores are really high. So that's why Postman really saved me in this, because we'll take a trip back to Postman. Postman let me save all of my requests. And 1, 2, 3. It let me save my request in what's called a collection. So this pane on the left-hand side with all of the folder names, each of these folders is called a collection. And what we had been doing before in these tabs, these are called requests. A collection is just a group of requests. And even within a collection, you can make new folders. So I could make a folder in here that groups all of the auth requests, for example. And I can put log in and log out in there. So you can organize and save all of your requests, which is fantastic. So like I said, we were going to preview a post request. And you'll see here, the verb is no longer get, it's a post request. And you'll see there's the endpoint we saw, /scores. Now, this looks a little new, this orange base URL. And in Postman, there's a super handy feature where you can use environment variables. So you see in this collection, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 requests, and they all hit the same endpoint. So instead of copying and pasting the same endpoint over and over again, instead I just save it in one place in the environments. And I can, if I change it once, it changes everywhere. So in my case, I can take you there to see. So for the 1, 2, 3 environment, we have a variable called base URL with the value localhost 444. So this is my local server. So now any place where there's base URL inside 2 curly braces, this value will be interpolated, and it's exactly the same as taking this. And if we go back to the post scores request, you can literally just replace it like this, except with interpolation, it's dynamic. Okay, so that's the mystery of the orange text here. So unlike a GET request, a POST request usually takes a body. And this is the first time we'll be diving into the body tab of the request panel. And since Postman has let me save my past requests, all of this is pre-populated here. I don't have to type it all from scratch. And if I want to add something new, I just change the values a little bit. So this is one of the existing users. This is Randy's ID. And I can give any score that I want here and any streak that I want and in any language. So if for example, if I wanted to test in my app, I wanted to make sure that when you get a higher score than the one that exists, that the new name shows up. I can just use Postman to make that request instead of making or trying to guess like German large numbers for 10 minutes or 3 years, however long it takes me to learn German. So let's take a look and see this in action. This is the app, and we'll see this lower section is the Japanese part of the game. And the highest score right now is Randy with 2,000 in a streak of 65. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if you get a higher score into the database. We'll go back to Postman. Instead of actually, using the game to make a new score, we'll just be logged in as Randy here and take a score of anything higher than 2,000. So maybe 2,500. Make up a streak like 90. And let's take the language Japanese, which is JA. So just like a GET request, we can hit send. And I don't have the right environment selected. So we define the environment over here. But you can switch between different environments up in the upper right here. Right now I'm in one called Hey Orca, but I can switch to 123. And if I don't remember what the variables are, there's a little I that'll let you peek inside and like, oh, okay, so this is the environment that has my local server as the base URL. And you can actually edit these right here too, which is great. Say that you wanted to test like a live production website, you just swap out the value here. But we're going to stick with localhost and make the request. And I'm not authorized to do that, it says. So this is actually a sign that my API is working, because my code says that you have to be logged in order to make a post scores request. But thankfully, I've already saved all of these requests in Postman. So all I have to do is log in and sign in as Randy. This is username and password. Now I'm logged in. It came back successfully with a 200. So I can try this again. I'll go back to the scores. All of that data I just typed is still saved here, and I can click send. And this time it succeeded because it knows I was logged in. Status 200, and you can see this is the response object. It comes back with some timestamps and things that the server I've coded to return. But let's see that this actually worked, and we'll jump back over to the app and refresh the page so it fetches the data again. And voila, you'll see that we have a new high score of Randy, streak of 90, and today's date. So I can tell that my API is working, and I didn't have to spend, a long time saying numbers out loud to test this. Okay, so any questions so far? That was quite a big chunk of information. We learned how to make a post request, and we learned about collections. Okay, so I'll just keep moving along then. You've learned like the meat of Postman. There's some extra potatoes we can also check out. So you guys learned about collections, which are just groups of responses, but you can take your collections and share them in different workspaces. So far we've only been using a personal workspace. Like all of the collections you've seen on the screen are private to me only, but you can choose to have a public workspace or a shared private team workspace where multiple people can view the same collection and share environments. So it's very useful if you're, for example, developing something on a team and you all need to share the same testing code, or if you are releasing your API to the public and you want to share a collection of Postman requests so that anybody that wants to use your API can just hit the ground sprinting and just click a couple buttons to try out your API. So which screen are we on now? I'll come back to Postman. Just to show you how to get into the team workspace, up in the upper left, there's a Workspaces tab. And right now we're in my workspace, which is private to me, but I can switch into team workspace. And this is a workspace that I use at work with my teammates. It says that it's empty right now because we actually abused our free license and had too many requests in here. So they recently archived all of our collections. But before, it was the same type of view that I have in the private space, a bunch of collections. And the cool thing is, if I edited anything in those collections on my computer, it was updated in real time on all of my teammates' Postmans as well, because Postman is connected through the cloud and it syncs to everyone's computer. And actually, you can access Postman in the web browser as well. You don't necessarily need the desktop application. I like the application because it's very fast and nice. But say like you spill coffee all over your computer, you can still access all of your collections and your shared collections through the Postman website in a browser version of the app. So this has been like a lightning introduction to Postman and how to use it to explore APIs. It's barely scratching the surface of all the stuff that Postman can do. For example, you can inspect cookies and it carry cookies over into different requests. You can write unit tests using Node, so you can programmatically check out the responses that are coming back. There's a ton of stuff here that you can check out if you'd like to keep learning about Postman and APIs. Another next step could be, if you're interested, you can apply for free to the Postman Student Expert Program, which basically is just like an e-learning module where you'll come out of it with a badge, a certification that you are a Postman student expert, and you can share it on your socials, use it in your job applications. Postman is becoming a very handy tool for many fields, so it doesn't hurt if you're trying to learn to check out this student expert program. And pay to use them. Some of them require that you make an account, but that can be a good opportunity to practice using authentication in your API requests. Just to take a quick look at what kind of things are here. You've got a ton of categories, from animals to anime to, sports and weather apps, all the classics, cat facts. The nice thing is there's a chart here, and it tells you which ones you need to sign up for, even if they are free. So ones that have like API key or auth means that it needs some extra step, but all of these that say no, you can just hit directly with Postman, and you'll get responses back. Yeah, so that has been a lightning introduction to Postman. We still have like 15 minutes left. I'm very happy to answer any questions or chat about your guys' thoughts about this. Any of you have some kind of app that you want to build that uses APIs? Or have any of you built something that uses an API, or built an API yourself?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I was actually working on an API while listening to this workshop.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it was really cool. I actually work for a vending machine company.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are like making IoT-based vending machines, that kind of stuff. Nothing.
An IoT vending machine. That's sweet.
Yeah.
Is the API that you're making for the vending machine?
Yeah, actually, yeah, right. I was writing an API to notify the user if their payment is being refunded, if they have made an online payment.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
a prime use case, like a good example.
right. I actually had no coding background before starting to work on this project.
Really?
So yeah, but yeah, it has been a great journey, and I actually use Postman, but not really proficient in that, I wouldn't say. So this workshop was really cool. Like, I got to know about collections and workspaces, which I didn't really know about.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like you say that you're kind of new to coding.
yeah.
For me, Postman really helps to get you up to speed fast with APIs especially, and learn everything that there is to see. You know, you reminded me that there's a cool feature in Postman. I'll show my screen again. What screen can you guys see right now? None?
GitHub. Yeah.
Is this Postman? Okay. So you can go to any, I'll go back to my personal workspace. From the Workspace tab, we can take a look at, where was that Kanye West one? You can see this is that request for Kanye West quotes. In the very, very far right, there's this little code tab. And if you click here, it's going to open this drop-down that shows you how to make this GET request in tons of different coding languages. So I don't know what coding language you're using for the IoT vending machine API, but it's got a ton here. From, you know, Python to PHP, JavaScript, Node, even curl. So curl you can use right in your terminal. I can copy this code and jump over to the terminal. I never got good at switching screens in this whole hour. Sorry, guys. So I'll open a new tab in my terminal and I'll just paste that code from Postman. Press enter. And now I can get Kanye West quotes from the terminal. So this is a great way to learn, like, how would I do this? Or how would I make this request in Python?
That will make my work easy.
Yeah, copy paste.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, because I know a lot of you guys in the Kurius community are Python people. Like I've seen you doing some data science stuff in the past, so you might want to check out the like Python HTTP client library, or what's another one? Just the requests library. You can just copy this code and use it when you're, you know, needing to get new data for your data science projects. Anybody else have a cool API they've been working on or have used that they'd like to share? I saw in the survey in the chat, it's pretty evenly distributed of people that have never heard of APIs, who've used them, and who's built them. And half of us knew what Postman was before now. Cool. I'll be sticking around until, I guess, 8:30 your guys' time. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat or say them out loud. It doesn't even have to be Postman related. I'm a JavaScript developer at my day job.
Hi, I was just curious what you were running in your terminal. Like, was that a Git bash in your terminal?
Good question. So my terminal, I am using something called Oh My Z shell.
Okay.
Yeah. But this curl command, it's very, if you already don't have, you probably already have it on your computer, most of you. You can use it in bash and shell, I'm pretty sure. Actually, can you guys still see my Postman? Yeah, for different types of shells, they even have those requests. So for like a classic shell, you can use wget to do request. And yeah, that's what's great about Postman. If they've got all of your bases covered. What else? While you guys are thinking of questions, I'll think of other cool features to show. And there are a lot. I guess another cool thing to share is, this is especially important if you're using like a workspace, like a team workspace. Here we only see like the code thing, but for other APIs, there's more icons over here. You can see there's like a document. And here you can even write like a description of what this endpoint does. You can give examples of what types of body comes back. So really, like, Postman can even become your documentation of your API. you can take notes here too if it's like somebody else's API that you're using. And a great example of an API that that uses Postman as a documentation almost is the Symbol API. Symbol is like a speech recognition and conversation machine learning analytics API. So they have a ton of cool stuff you can do by sending like audio files, text files, and their collection really has great documentation. I can open any of these requests and see everything I need to know about what it does, what comes back as an example. So that's another example of Postman being very educational. I see somebody in the chat asked if we can do a patch request. And I have to say, like, a patch request is quite rare for me. I haven't done many. Let's see if any of these public APIs have one. Basically, a patch request is going to be the same as making a post request, just the verb is different. So let's see, free API. Oh, actually, I'm not sharing the right screen anymore. Oh, Discord. Change windows to the browser. Okay, so free API with patch. There's just a lot of explanation ones. Yeah, I can't find one right off the top of my head, but for example, I don't know, if you were on Twitter or Discord and you wanted to change your message, like sometimes you can click the edit button to change it, right? Maybe that's making a patch request behind the scenes to make a request that's very similar in shape to a post request in that it will have a body like this. It'll have a body, except the verb is different. And this means it's going to be interpreted by the server differently, depending on how they coded it. Yeah. So sorry I didn't answer your question very well, but just know that the patch and post requests look very identical. I should mention that with post requests, you get a bunch of different flavors of the type of body you can send. We sent a JSON body, so that's like what's on the screen right now. And that's when you click this raw type, like raw JSON. But you can also send like form data as if it was an HTML form. This binary one means like uploading a file. And you can see some of the API requests here require a file. Also, there's a GraphQL option. So GraphQL is another type of API query language. And GraphQL, you'll get like a query panel on the left and a variable panel on the right. I don't know how many of you have played with GraphQL, but just know that you can make any type of request here in Postman. Yeah, so we're almost out of time. It's your last chance to squeeze in a question. All right, well, I will share the slides then in the workshop channel. And yeah, thank you guys for spending your Friday night with me. And if you are interested in learning more about Postman, check out the link I'm going to send soon. And yeah, feel free to reach out and ask me questions about APIs anytime. It's a very exciting topic for me, so I'm happy to talk to you guys about it. Yeah, so thank you guys.